Imagine moving into your dream lakeside home, only to have the HOA show up demanding control of the very water in your backyard. But what they didn't know? I secretly owned the docks they relied on for years, and turning the tables would change everything. When I first moved into the quiet lakeside neighborhood, it felt like I had finally stumbled upon the life I'd always imagined. The house itself wasn't huge, but it sat on a gentle slope with a view that could take your breath away. The lake stretched out like a sheet of silver glass reflecting the morning sun in a way that made the whole world feel calm. I could already picture lazy afternoons on the deck, the sound of water lapping against the shore, maybe even the occasional fishing trip right from my backyard. I was still surrounded by half-open boxes and the smell of fresh paint when I heard footsteps on the gravel driveway. Glancing outside, I saw a small group of neighbors approaching in a tight cluster. They wore matching polo shirts embroidered with the neighborhood's name and carried clipboards like they were on an official mission. My excitement cooled just a little. The tallest man stepped forward first. He had a deep, commanding voice and the kind of posture that made it seem like he was used to people listening to him. "Welcome to the community," he said warmly enough. But there was a sharpness in his eyes that didn't match the smile. "I'm Gerald, president of the Homeowners Association. We need to talk about the lake." I blinked, confused. "The lake?" I asked, wondering what that had to do with me moving in. "Yes," he said, exchanging glances with the others. "The HOA manages the lake as common property. We collect dues from all residents for maintenance, safety inspections, and dock upkeep. You'll need to sign the standard agreement, granting the association access rights to the shoreline. It keeps everything organized." He slid a paper from his clipboard and held it out to me. The others nodded silently, watching my reaction like hawks. I glanced at the paper but didn't reach for it. "I just got here yesterday," I said carefully. "I'm still getting settled. I'd like some time to review everything first." Gerald's smile tightened, just a fraction. "Of course," he said, but his voice had a weight to it, a subtle pressure that made me uneasy. They stayed a few more minutes, politely pointing out community rules and talking about neighborhood events. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a friendly visit. It was a demand dressed as a welcome. As they finally left, I caught the way one of them looked back at the lake almost possessively. My stomach tightened. I didn't know exactly why, but something about their urgency didn't sit right with me. The house was supposed to be a new beginning, yet already a shadow of suspicion stretched across that sparkling water. Over the next several days, the peaceful image I had of my new home started to change. At first, it was little things I almost brushed off, like the faint clatter of wood in the distance at night or the faint glow of a flashlight dancing across the water when the neighborhood was otherwise silent. I told myself it was probably just other residents enjoying a late evening by the lake. But each time I noticed something, it happened closer to my property line, as if someone was deliberately testing the boundary. One morning after a storm, I decided to walk along the edge of my yard to inspect for fallen branches. That's when I saw it. A narrow gate I hadn't paid attention to before, half hidden by tall weeds. It was locked with an old padlock, and on the other side a wooden walkway stretched out over the water toward a cluster of docks. The boards creaked softly under the breeze. I crouched down, tracing the posts that disappeared beneath the surface of the lake. The whole setup looked well used, scuff marks on the planks, fresh rope tied to the posts, as if people came and went regularly. The sight nagged at me. If the HOA claimed the lake was common property, why did it look like these docks were treated as private? That evening, I dug through the packet of documents from my home purchase, determined to understand exactly where my property ended. The stack was thicker than I remembered, full of old surveys and legal descriptions written in dry language. But then I found a folded map tucked near the back, yellowed with age, stamped and signed decades ago. I spread it across the kitchen table, my heart beating a little faster as I compared it to the yard outside. The survey lines ran clean and precise, and there it was in black ink. The shoreline and every inch of those docks fell squarely inside my property boundary. Not a vague shared zone, not a communal right-of-way. My property. I read the wording twice to be sure. It clearly stated, exclusive lake access, including structures extending from the southern shoreline, which matched the docks exactly. A jolt of realization ran through me. The HOA wasn't just casually including me in their management plan. They were trying to gain control of something they didn't own. That night, I couldn't stop replaying every detail of my first encounter with Gerald and his team. Their clipped smiles, the urgency to get my signature, the way one neighbor glanced at the water with something that looked almost like possession. It all made sense now. They hadn't expected someone to read the fine print. They thought a newcomer would simply sign whatever was put in front of them. The next morning, as sunlight glinted off the calm water, I noticed fresh footprints pressed into the damp mud near the gate. Someone had been there after the storm. My unease hardened into certainty. They weren't just hoping I'd hand over the rights, they were already acting as if those docks belonged to them. The following week felt like a slow siege. At first it was just Gerald stopping by again, his booming voice echoing across my porch as he held a new stack of papers. "Just a friendly reminder," he said with a forced grin. "We really need your signature for the community records. It keeps everything simple." I gave him the same polite answer as before, still reviewing the details, still settling in. But his eyes narrowed and I caught the hint of frustration just before he turned to leave. By midweek, the visits doubled. Sometimes it was Gerald, sometimes a different board member who introduced herself as Diane, each of them trying a slightly different angle. Diane leaned on neighborly charm, telling me how everyone pitches in for the good of the lake. Gerald switched to warnings, saying things like, "We'd hate to see tension in the neighborhood." Their persistence was like a steady drip of water, designed to wear me down. Then the letters started arriving. At first they looked almost official, printed on HOA letterhead with bold words like urgent notice and payment due. One envelope contained an itemized lake maintenance fee for the past month, an amount I had never agreed to pay. Another warned that if I didn't comply I could face fines or even legal action. Each one was signed by Gerald and stamped with the association seal. Instead of intimidating me, the letters only fueled my resolve. I spread them out across the dining table alongside the property survey and my deed. Every legal document I owned told the same story. The shoreline and the docks were mine, not common property. Still, I didn't want to make a move without being absolutely sure. I called the county records office and explained the situation. The clerk on the phone didn't even hesitate after checking the records. "Your deed is clear," she said. "Those docks and the water immediately around them belong to your lot. The HOA has no legal claim." To be thorough, I also reached out to a local real estate attorney. After reviewing the paperwork, he confirmed the same thing and added, "If they keep sending those bills, that's harassment. They can't charge you for something they don't own." Hearing it from a professional was the reassurance I needed. Armed with this knowledge, my irritation shifted into determination. I wasn't just defending my own rights anymore. I was beginning to wonder why they were so desperate in the first place. What was it about these docks that made them push so hard? Each knock on my door, each letter slipped into my mailbox, felt less like neighborly concern and more like a cover for something they didn't want me to uncover. By the end of the week, my patience was wearing thin. I wasn't afraid of them, but I knew the next time they showed up, I wouldn't just stand there nodding. I was ready to turn the pressure back on them and make it clear that I knew exactly where the real ownership lay. The next Saturday afternoon, I decided it was time to stop letting them set the pace. I sent a short, polite note to Gerald inviting the board to meet at my house the following evening to clarify property matters. I made sure the note sounded cooperative, even friendly, because I wanted them to arrive thinking victory was finally within reach. Sunday dusk settled over the lake like a dark, calm sheet when I heard the crunch of shoes on gravel. Gerald arrived first, shoulders squared, followed by Diane and 2 other board members. They wore the same matching polo shirts as the first day I met them, as if the uniform itself carried authority. I led them into the dining room, where the long oak table was cleared except for a neat stack of papers. Gerald began before sitting down. "I'm glad you've come to your senses," he said with that rehearsed smile. "This will make things easier for everyone. Let's get this agreement signed so we can move forward as a community." I let the silence hang for a moment, then slid the top sheet forward, not their agreement, but a copy of my deed, the county seal crisp and unmistakable. Beside it I placed the old land survey, a bright yellow sticky note marking the section that described the shoreline and docks in detail. "I invited you here," I said evenly, "so we could clear up any confusion. These documents show that the shoreline and the docks are entirely on my property. That means I hold the rights to everything you've been asking me to hand over." Diane leaned in, scanning the page. Her polite smile faded first. Gerald glanced at it, then back at me, his jaw tightening. "There must be some misunderstanding," he said, but the confidence in his voice cracked slightly. "No misunderstanding," I replied, keeping my tone calm but firm. "If anyone uses these docks or charges fees related to them without my permission, that's trespassing and fraud. I'd prefer to keep this neighborly, but I'm prepared to involve the county and my attorney if necessary." The room went heavy with silence. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Gerald opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "Well, there's a long-standing community tradition of shared lake use," he offered weakly, as if tradition could outweigh a legal deed. "I respect traditions," I said, "but the law is clear. If you'd like to schedule community events on the lake in the future, you can request permission like anyone else." I kept my eyes steady on Gerald until he finally looked away. After a few more awkward exchanges, they gathered their papers, still unsigned, and left without another word about fees or agreements. I watched them walk back down the driveway, their flashlights bouncing in the dark, the sound of their footsteps sharp against the quiet night. For the first time since moving in, I felt like the balance had shifted. As the door clicked shut, I exhaled a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The fight wasn't about friendliness or cooperation. It was about control, and tonight I had taken it back. In the days that followed the tense meeting, the entire neighborhood seemed to change around me. Where there had once been watchful eyes and clipped greetings, I began noticing polite nods and even small waves from people I barely knew. The aggressive letters stopped arriving altogether. The HOA, which had once felt like a storm pressing at my doorstep, went strangely silent. No more knocks, no more urgent envelopes, just a heavy, almost awkward quiet. Each morning I walked down to the water with a cup of coffee, expecting to see someone trying their luck at the docks, but the planks stayed empty. The ropes that once tied visiting boats hung slack. The echo of footsteps I had grown used to hearing at night never returned. The lake itself seemed calmer, as if it had been holding its breath along with me. About a week later, I was raking leaves near the shore when an elderly neighbor named Mr. Harris strolled by. He was a gentle man with a slow, deliberate way of speaking. After a few pleasantries, he lowered his voice and said, "You know, they've been using those docks for years, renting out slips to folks from outside the neighborhood. Cash only, no records. I'm not surprised they came at you so hard. They probably thought you'd sign without looking too closely." I felt a flicker of shock, followed quickly by understanding. That explained their urgency, their persistence, and the strange activity at night. It wasn't about community harmony or maintenance fees, it was about money. They'd built an entire side hustle on property that wasn't theirs. I thanked Mr. Harris for telling me, though he seemed almost relieved just to share the secret. As he walked away, I looked out at the wooden docks gleaming in the late afternoon sun. They no longer felt like a source of stress. They were a reminder of how close I'd come to losing something valuable before I even knew it was mine. Over time, a funny thing happened. The very people who had pressured me began treating me with a kind of quiet respect. A few even offered friendly invitations to neighborhood events. It wasn't exactly friendship, but there was no more hostility. It was as if standing my ground had shifted the way they saw me, from the naive newcomer to someone who wouldn't be pushed around. Now, whenever I sit on the deck in the evening, the lake spreading out like liquid gold under the sunset, I can't help but feel a private satisfaction. They had stormed in demanding my lake, certain I would bend to their will, but they never realized the truth. I controlled their prized docks all along. What began as an unexpected confrontation ended as a quiet victory. And every ripple across the water reminds me that sometimes the best way to win is simply to know what's yours and refuse to let go. And that's how a quiet move to my dream lake house turned into a battle I never saw coming. The HOA thought they could bully me into giving up what was mine, but the law and the docks were on my side. If you enjoyed this story of standing your ground, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next real-life twist. Share this with anyone who loves a good neighborhood showdown, and tell me in the comments what would you have done if the HOA came after your lake.